Game over. It is game over.
Game over, cancer.
I'm Val Solomon, Director of Program Impact at Cannonball Kids Cancer Foundation.
And I'm Dana Nichols, Executive Director of CKC.
Game Over, Cancer, a podcast dedicated to exploring conversations about pediatric cancer research, solutions, and inspiring family stories.
We're a nonprofit dedicated to creating innovative treatment options for kids fighting cancer and educating for change.
By creating a space for these conversations, we empower the community to take action and provide tangible hope.
Game over, cancer. Screw you, cancer. Today, our episode is with a friend we've made through foundation to foundation relations, and that's been so great. And I think when I think of today and I think of this person, I think about the authenticity of showing up where you are, of not really knowing, and also just being honest with the mental health journey of cancer and survivorship and the resilience it takes.
Yeah, that's right. Today we're talking to someone who is a 3-time cancer survivor, and also former scientist, and also in fundraising for pediatric cancer and other hospital efforts. But our guest today is giving us a deep dive into not just that, cancer survivorship looks different for everybody, but it can look different over time for one patient.
Yeah.
But it's a really great conversation, and we're real excited to have this memorialized because we've had lots of conversations with him, and I love that we actually have it on video now. This is great to be able to share.
And our listeners get to hear too, so we hope you enjoy this episode.
Our guest today is a former scientist with a background in molecular biology and biochemistry, having spent nearly 12 years in a biotech lab. Then he transitioned to the nonprofit world and now serves as the Senior Director of Foundation Relations at the Lucile Packard Foundation for Children's Health. He also chairs the Patient and Family Advisory Council for the Stanford Adolescent and Young Adult Cancer Program. He holds a bachelor in biology from Whittier College, a master's in microbiology and molecular genetics from Loma Linda University, and a master's in nonprofit administration from the University of San Francisco. As a 3-time survivor of childhood and young adult cancer, he's a passionate advocate for survivorship, community building, and connecting others with critical resources. He considers his professional and volunteer work a privilege, his way of giving back and making the path easier for others. He is married to his wife, Jennifer, since 2013, and they enjoy traveling, reading, and adventuring together. Please welcome our guest today, Jasan Zimmerman.
Hello. Hello, hello.
Hi, Jason.
I think we should back up to the intro because I read his bio and it's his beautiful wife, Jennifer.
Oh, sorry.
Since 2013.
Sorry, Jennifer. That's my bad.
And that is a man who loves his wife.
Yes.
That's a very important part of it. Yeah, thank you.
Please give her my apologies. I was just trying to shorten my word count. That was the wrong word to take out. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know as partners with CKC and your position with the Lucile Packard Foundation, we have had lots of conversations. We've kind of delved into your background a little bit. And I think the reason why we've started this podcast is because we have those types of conversations and we love to share this with as many people as possible. So we really appreciate you joining us today, all the way from the West Coast at an ungodly hour. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm usually maybe sleeping in a little bit at this time, but I'm happy to be here.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, we mentioned it in your intro, but I guess we'll start with you're a 3-time cancer survivor. Tell us a little bit and share with our audience about your cancer diagnosis and the journey of your treatment.
So my first diagnosis was in 1976 when I was about 6 or 7 months old. I had neuroblastoma on the left side of my neck. I just trimmed my beard, and you can see the scar if you're in person. It's kind of prominent, which is really interesting. But tumor was removed, had radiation kind of to this side of the neck. That radiation most likely caused thyroid cancer when I was 15. So I had a thyroidectomy and I had radioactive iodine treatment. And then when I was 21, the thyroid cancer came back. So I had a higher dose of radioactive iodine but my last treatment was 1997, so I'm coming up on 30 years, which is wild,
Yeah.
since my last treatment. And so, yeah, I spent a lot of that time not wanting to think about being sick, not wanting to talk about being sick, and then kind of ended up on this sort of cancer advocacy journey, and now, merging the volunteer work that I love with the professional work, raising money for our children's hospital at Stanford and for the maternal and child health programs, research programs at the Stanford School of Medicine. So I've kind of come full circle, and in this place where I feel like I'm really able to give back, not just for cancer stuff, but for any kind of maternal and child health issues. And so it's really fulfilling to me, really impactful.
It's incredible that you stay in this field for so long, one.
Yeah.
But I think when you're saying a 3-time cancer survivor at such different but pivotal stages of adolescent development is
Right.
unreal. And I wondered if you had any thoughts to the difference. I mean, to be a baby, to not know and grow up in one way, then to be 15, then to be 21, what that looked like differently from time to time.
Yeah, so obviously I don't remember anything as a baby, but I do remember every time I sneezed going to the doctor. So my parents were very vigilant,
Yes.
and having regular checkups. I think every few months until I was 5, and then every twice a year since then. But then when I was 15, I think that was when like the cancer experience really began for me. I think I knew I had been through this as a baby, but it just wasn't like at the forefront of my mind, in front of my face. And so when that happened, I think that's when the depression hit. I was really struggling with all of that from 15 through probably my early to mid 30s. And again, like I said, I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. And I just buried it, which, has caused issues down the line. And I think sometimes I'm still struggling with my mental health even today. But yeah, at 15 in high school, I was a sophomore, trying to just be a normal high school kid, and I didn't want to be that kid that stood out, like the kid with cancer. I played tennis in high school, and so I had just made it up to varsity for the playoffs, and we had seen the surgeon, and he's like, "Okay, we're gonna schedule the surgery for next week." I was like, "No, we have the playoffs. It's I just made it up," and he's like, "No." So I didn't unfortunately didn't get to do that, but yeah, then so I finished high school. I was out for a couple weeks after the surgery, and had the radiation treatment in the summer, so I didn't really miss any school. And then went away to college. I was supposed to have that thyroid scan that showed the recurrence before my senior year, but I kind of talked him into pushing it back, and so that didn't really affect my college undergrad time. And then had the scan that showed that the thyroid cancer came back right before I started grad school. So that was a little, awkward, I guess, for me. And yeah, and then I think I moved away from home, moved up to the Bay Area, and tried to get life started, I think, but it was always something missing. There was always some kind of weird, I still can't even really describe it. It's hard to describe, but I always felt like I was in a bad mood. and I finally, sort of figured out I think I need some therapy, and so I did that. And so yeah, and then I found a support group locally here in the Bay Area for AYAs, adolescent and young adults, patients and survivors. And so I felt really compelled to go to that support group, but I didn't want to go, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And so I would get there early, but I wouldn't go inside. I would sit in the car and listen to the radio for like 20 or 30 minutes, and then I would show up. And I think for the first year, I didn't talk at all beyond like, I'm Jason, and here's what my cancer history was. And there were a couple people who were really, really involved in the advocacy world. And so I credit them for kind of sparking that idea in my brain and giving me the idea that I could do something like this. And so then that kind of started the advocacy journey. And yeah, here I am.
Wow. And I know we've sort of talked offline a little bit, being a cancer survivor, and for as long as you have carried through your survivorship. You have talked about how your story has changed, how you tell that journey has changed the longer you've been post-treatment. So can you talk a little bit about the differences once you did start sharing your story, the differences between when it first started and then how it's evolved and where you're at now?
Yeah, so like I said, I didn't want to talk about it, and this whole kind of advocacy world opened up to me. And at first, it was, here's my story. I'm a survivor. Yay, right? Like inspire people or whatever. I remember I was just recounting the story a couple weeks ago. The very first talk I gave, I was on a board of a local cancer organization, and we did a fundraiser. And so I started telling my story, and I was talking so fast. I just wanted to get it over with
Yeah.
so quickly. And my mom was sitting in the back of the room, and she just hollers out, "Slow your roll!"
Thanks,
And so
Mom.
I like your mom.
she's very good at that. So she kind of got me, centered a little bit. And um, so yeah, I really struggled with those first few talks just because I wanted it to be over with really quickly. And so then that kind of moved into what's going on with the adolescent young adult population, patient survivor population. AYA is the term that we use, and so you'll probably hear me slip out of the full description and go into the acronym. Um, AYAs fall through the cracks. That's the age group from 15 to 39. You're not quite an adult, and you're not quite a child, and so you're kind of in between. You're trying to start your life. You finished college. You're in high school. You're finished with grad school, trying to find a job. And so then my story was like, here's what AYA cancer survivorship looks like, and sharing that story. Super involved in a lot of the AYA support organizations, and the older I've gotten, the more that I've seen that sector especially grow, the AYA sector. There's so many great organizations doing awesome stuff for AYAs. And so then I could think more, what is the impact now, and how can I speak about survivorship? And so I was in a clinical trial for one of my long-term side effects from the thyroid cancer treatment, and it was wildly obvious that there was no patient involvement in planning the trial or implementing the trial or anything like that. And so that's kind of become the soapbox that I'm on now, is like, let's get our patients involved in planning trials, implementing trials, planning research even. If you want to start a new program, even if it's a clinical program, have your patients involved, have them be equal partners, especially for the research, equal partners as the scientists. I have 40 something, almost 50 years of experience as a survivor. And so let me use that, right? Like I have more experience than some of the doctors that I see.
Right.
And so we're all like this. All of the survivors, or patients and survivors, are like this. We want to share. We want to tell you what we need, and we don't want to be told what we need. And so that's kind of the evolution of, I guess, the way I share my story.
Do you have, I wonder, advice? I think it's very beautiful to say, like, even that experience of I knew I needed to go to a support group, so I sat in the car for a long time. Like that hurdle of, I know I want to be a patient advocate, I am one, or I am brave enough to speak up, is really difficult. I wondered if you had advice to anyone listening that, feels like I want to do something with that and has that hurdle to get over.
I would take a step back even further and say I did not know I wanted to be an advocate. I didn't know any of that at
Okay.
that point. I was just like, I need to be at this place, but I don't really want to be at this group. And so that hurdle was, you're right, super tough. I was a stubborn 15-year-old, and I'm a stubborn almost 50-year-old now. So I think that was the big challenge, was like, I know I need something, but how do I do it? And I think part of it was that the group was super welcoming, and that was helpful.
Mm-hmm.
But it was just all kind of internal to me. Like I had to get over this hurdle and say, I know something's missing. I don't quite know what it is. I don't know what's going on, but I need to feel compelled to find this support. And there's not really a magic bullet that I can say like, oh, here's how you really do it. 'Cause,
Right.
Right.
it was a lot of trial and error for me. But I think just going and being in a place where there are other people who are in a similar boat or who have been in that similar boat and are supportive, and kind of getting out of your own head. I think that's still one of my issues is overthinking things and figuring out what the worst thing could be that's going to happen. And so kind of just stepping away and just kind of letting go and seeing what happens really. And that's, I don't know, part of the adventuring that my wife and I try to do too sometimes.
Yeah, I love that. Overthinking is my favorite pastime as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Which is just to say, like, we're all just fighting against a billion years of whatever's supposed to be in there,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Totally.
hard.
It's hard.
I think it's really interesting that your whole career, really, even when we talk about being in science and microbiology, I mean,
Which I gotta admit, I don't know that you mentioned that
No,
before. I
you've
read it in
never
your
mentioned
bio.
that.
We were like, he was a scientist before. That's
Yeah.
why he's so smart.
Well, a reason
Reason
100.
Reason 100. Yeah.
But so I think I'm interested to know, because yes, that's never come up. If I thought you were hanging like us the whole time, like fundraising and not fully understanding what everyone's talking about. But when you first were like looking down a science path, was your cancer part of that, or you had always had an interest in science? And then we'll go into how did we get into then foundation relations too?
So both. I obviously always had an interest in science just because of my cancer history, and like every other pediatric cancer survivor, I wanted to be a doctor. I don't think I've ever met a pediatric survivor who didn't want to be some kind of clinician. And I applied to medical school a few times and didn't get in, and so I was like, what am I gonna do? And my mom said, you should look at grad school. And so this was in towards the end of my senior year of college, so it was kind of a little late, but I found some places that didn't have deadlines, and so I was able to enroll at Loma Linda University, which was about an hour or so from where I grew up, and also, ironically, where I had the neuroblastoma treatment. And so that was kind of a full circle moment. But once I finished the master's, I had always been interested in biotechnology. That was a big part of what I learned about in college, and so ended up starting there. It was a biotech company that did like industrial cleaning enzymes, and one of the first projects I worked on was using bacteria to make polyester, basically, and that turned into rugs and socks, or carpet and socks. And
From bacteria?
yeah, so they were able to make this stuff, and then it got processed and spun into socks and rugs and stuff, carpets and stuff. And so I did a bunch of stuff, biochemistry and like assay design and assay development. And the last project I was on was breaking down corn cobs and what they call corn stover, which is like all the leftover husk and stuff, into fuel ethanol. And so we used enzymes to kind of break that stuff down. And so it was really cool, really interesting, but super tedious. And it didn't hit me, it wasn't super impactful for me as far as how I felt. And so I think I got burned out probably just a few years in, but I stayed for almost 12 until I got laid off. And so um, the layoff was scary, but I had already started at the University of San Francisco in the nonprofit administration master's program, and I figured, well, once I finish that, then I'll try to find a nonprofit job. And I wanted to, at the time, I wanted to do some kind of cancer nonprofit on the ground service provider kind of thing. And so I got laid off from the lab job about halfway through that program, and was able to transition to a local foundation in Palo Alto that funded basic science research. And so kind of had the science background plus the half of the nonprofit degree. And then I moved there. But I call it like my midlife crisis sort of career change, where, I went from I'm a scientist, but I'm doing all this cancer advocacy volunteer work that really means something to me. And I was really trying to build my network, build my resume so I could find a job that really, really meant something. And while the layoff was scary, it really kind of pushed me out of the nest and got me onto the path that is much better for me personally now.
I think that's awesome. And there's a couple times you've already spoken where, whether it's not getting into med school and pivoting, but that sounds like it also aligned with when you had another diagnosis or now a layoff that turns into a career change is like, we got to go with what we got and, keep going. But knowing that you're moving from something that you're passionate about and is your volunteerism and is filling a bucket to now it's your career, what was that change like? And knowing you have such a history with cancer, how has that influenced working in this space?
Yeah, so when I was thinking of leaving that foundation at first, I was like, well, maybe I can find another cancer nonprofit job, or I was also looking into like cancer advocacy for pharmaceutical companies. And at the time I was still doing a ton of volunteer work. And so I just kind of I had this sort of epiphany of like, that's going to be all cancer all the time. And that's going to burn me out. And that's just not going to be healthy. And so I got lucky that the program manager job on the team that I'm on now opened up. And so that's in foundation relations, which is working with foundations like CKC to find funding for whatever program there is. And so I had the big foundation background, and I learned about how boards work and how program officers work and how that funding model is. So I was able to use that experience plus the science experience plus the cancer experience to kind of inform the work that I thought I would do when I first started. And so I've kind of moved up from program manager to senior director. Now I lead the team. And my mentor and former manager who left about 3 years ago was super encouraging. And, she wanted me to kind of feel comfortable using my story to inform the work that I did. But the other cool part is that I don't only raise money for cancer, even though it means so much to me, but that kind of gives me balance where I'm not like all cancer all the time, which is what I was worried about with, kind of burning myself out.
That's phenomenal. And you know what? It's making me think that you're really a unicorn, right? Like in our profession, right? Like if we sat down and we're like, who would we love to be able to do this work? It's somebody with personal experience, with professional background who knows nonprofit. He's a unicorn, really.
Well, it's really informing everything we've said behind your back, which is we love Jason and he just really gets it.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh, he really gets
it.
Because he's lived it, studied it, and all the things.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned the unicorn thing because my wife's been calling me a unicorn for several years, and it fits, right? She's saying the same thing, right? Like I don't know anyone who's a survivor who became an advocate, who's now a fundraiser, who is super involved in volunteer work and stuff. So it's pretty funny.
It's a very, very hard thing to balance. And what's coming up for me as you're speaking about this is what I've seen from our side. We're working with families or we're working with survivors, and they've come to us and say, I'd love to share your story, or we've asked them, and really trying to gauge how helpful. I know we'll take this story and, we'll make something with it. We'll be able to do something with it for CKC, but also how helpful is this for the survivor to go through or for the family, and kind of counterbalancing that. And what's coming up for me is a few experiences where we have conversations with folks who talk about wanting to be involved, but not actually doing the thing to be involved with. And so leaving the door open. But it, to the point where we're sitting across the table from survivors basically saying, listen, there might be a reason here why you're not comfortable taking the next step. And I understand you wanting to do something, but the fact that you are afraid to take the next step is telling me maybe this isn't the right time. And we're not shutting the door, but when you do feel comfortable and you have found your voice or you want help doing that, we are absolutely here. But let's explore the idea that you can tell me 2 or 3 things and I can make something out of that, or this might not be the right time. And so I wonder, how you draw from your own experience. Where does that come up for you when you're working with survivors or with patients who are on the treatments that you're helping to raise funds for? You're having to storytell with your donors. How does that come up for you?
So much to unpack there, but you're spot on with everything. For the Stanford Adolescent Young Adult Cancer Program, for our Patient and Family Advisory Council, so we are a group of patient survivors, clinicians, family members, and social workers, child life specialists. So we kind of help move the program forward. People come to our meetings and say, "Hey, we want to do a research project. Can we have your advice?" Or we have people who want to come and volunteer, and so we help with that. And we talk a ton about the direction of the program and resources, services, events to bring patients together. So that's something that we really think about a lot when a new patient comes in. Like, how far out of treatment are you? What's your headspace? Is it the right time? Like you said, Val, is it the right time for you? Is it the right time for us? And that's different for everyone. And so it can kind of get you into a little trouble if it's not the right time, if it's like still too close and there's maybe some PTSD there or some other kind of, treatment issues or whatever. So we want to make sure that the person is doing the right thing at the right time. And I think even me being so far out, still sometimes it's not the right time, right? And so that's also a consideration. But the other piece to what you were saying is, I think for me, especially when I share my story, it kind of helps me process things too, and helps me realize, like, hey, I went through all this terrible stuff, but there's something good coming out of it, and that kind of helps move me forward, but like also to kind of give back and pay it forward, I guess. And so I try to kind of impart that wisdom on different people who are, involved with the advisory council or other people that I talk with, patients and survivors. And then the other piece of that is storytelling, especially with research, right? You both know that research can take 10, 20, 30 years to get into the clinic, into a patient. And so once that actually happens, and if you can hear from a patient or a survivor who said, hey, this is the treatment, and I was here, struggling, and now I'm back to normal, or as close to normal as I can be. Those stories are incredibly powerful. And that's what drives people, right? I've heard, some of the scientists say, well, I can't get super technical because people get lost and people's eyes glaze over, and, the science is really complicated. But when you can hear someone say, oh yeah, all that science is super complicated, but here I am, look at me, I'm good now. That's incredibly powerful. And those stories are the best ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And then it falls, I think, on all of us to say, how do we share that story respectfully and ethically? And how are we making sure that, that person can be a survivor and not have to feel like they have to pop in and help us promote this program all the time too, right? So that is the other balance to that. And I wondered if we can go briefly into some of the things that we have all worked on together. If you wanted to share a little bit about, because we've been out to visit you for a couple of CHEK presentations now, any kind of impact that CKC donors and our funded research has had at your institution that you'd like to share, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I think our foundation, as the fundraising office for Lucile Packard Children's Hospital, Stanford, and for the maternal and child health research programs at the Stanford School of Medicine, we feel like CKC, like every donation counts. Every donation does something, whether it's, $1 or $100,000. And so that first project that you all funded, or the second one, I think, for Tani Gruber, is going really well. She's studying infant ALL, which is apparently even more difficult to treat than kids who are a little bit older who get ALL. And Tanya's so great to work with, and knowing that she really cares about the patients and has that whole patient experience at the forefront of her mind is really important. And then the most recent one you funded, Michelle Mange, is a brain tumor doctor, a neuroimmuno-oncologist who has this incredible clinical trial going for DIPG, which is a really terrible brain tumor that basically has no cure and has had very little progress in treatment over like the last, I don't know, 50 years or something. And she's had patients who have had complete response and no tumor whatsoever. And so these kinds of things, I didn't have a brain tumor, I didn't have ALL, but for me to see the impact on the patients and to know that now there are kids who are going to make it who may not have before the research, before the trial, before the support from CKC. And that just means a ton to me. The impact is just so incredible. And it's, one of the proudest things for me is to be able to find the funding for these researchers and help with that and make sure that these kids and the families too are, supported and put in a place to thrive.
I got to say, from our experience too, it's been really exciting when we get to meet folks like you at those types of institutions. And, I can think back to the first Zoom that we had where we're all talking about what are the goals that we have for our investment and what are you all trying, like what kind of science do you have on the table this year that might coincide with our mission? And it is like the ultimate fundraising high, right? When you connect with it, you're like, oh, we have some resources, you have the need, we're going to connect this together. It's like, it's why we do what we do. And I just remember leaving that Zoom thinking, they will see how the SAB reviews the science, but they seem like an amazing partnership. Jason seems to get it. He knows what we're talking about. He knows why we're doing what we're doing. And I just remember it being a really great conversation. And to know that we're sitting on the other side of that with a patient with DIPG that's out walking around and, return to life and enjoying their life is phenomenal. It's the goal that we all have in the work that we do.
Yeah, and when we talk literally walking around, a child who's regained the ability to leave a hospital bed and go out and be in the world, like I have thought about that so many times in the past, year, and that's why we're here. And it's incredible. And that we are able to partner on that there's a person who's willing, like Dr. Mange, to dedicate her life to that, that we all get to come alongside is incredible.
It certainly makes those days where you're dealing with like an IT issue or whatever, like all the little stuff all day long. That's just like, this is, my day shouldn't be this hard, but at the end of the day, if you keep pushing through, that's the type of impact we're going to have. So it makes it all worth it.
As we start to wrap up, I wondered, coming back to your survivorship, is there something that we can leave people with of, I wish people understood this about life after cancer?
Yeah, I think, the big thing for me especially is once treatment is finished, you're not done, really. I remember the very first podcast. I don't remember which one you said it, but the sentence came out, pediatric cancer is a life sentence or a death sentence. And I'm happy that it wasn't a death sentence for me, but it's definitely a life sentence. And so dealing with these like long-term effects, late-term effects, like I mentioned, I was in a trial that helped with some of that, which is great. The mental health piece is a huge challenge too, I think. And if you're, like I said, a stubborn guy like me who didn't want to talk and didn't want to get therapy or anything, then, you're going to struggle down the line. So I think once treatment's over, really the rest of your life begins. And so you're having to deal with what did the treatment do to me? And whether that's physical or, something with your mental health, get all that stuff dealt with. Don't bury the mental health piece, because I'm like I mentioned, I'm still struggling with that on a semi-regular basis. But and really it's a family disease too, especially the pediatric cancer side. The patients get all the attention, rightfully so, but the caregivers, the parents, the families, the friends, everybody else is affected. It's a community thing. And so when you can see some of these fundraisers that happen like on a grassroots level to support a kid or a rare cancer disease or whatever, it's really incredible. But I think the older I've gotten, we don't have kids, but I really see, especially through the work that I do now, how important supporting the parents is. And so I have, great respect. The older I get, more and more respect for my parents and how they kind of had this trial by fire of learning about cancer and having no cancer in either side of the family and having no real medical experience or experience with the medical system. They taught me to advocate for myself. They advocated and fought for me and taught me how to do that. And now I'm trying to help advocate and fight for, the next person coming along the cancer journey.
I think the last thing that we'd like to ask is, what do you hope listeners take away from your story? If you could leave them with any piece that to kind of close out our conversation, what would you like them to take away from your story, your experience, our conversation today?
Wow, that's could go a million different ways.
Pick one. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I think research is so important, and that's how lives are being saved, a generation down the line. The mental health piece is often overlooked, and I'm giving you two, so don't get mad.
No, that's fine.
The mental health piece is often overlooked, and it's really, really, really important. And so make sure that that's addressed. And you've heard me talk about this journey of almost 20 or so years of cancer advocacy. If you're finished with treatment and you don't want to do that, you don't want to go climb Mount Everest, or you don't want to be a huge fundraiser, that's awesome. Go for it. Do whatever feels right to you. You don't have to follow this path of, well, I'm a survivor, so now I need to throw myself in to be super involved. Do whatever works best for you. And don't feel bad about not, being a super survivor, really, because it's just a matter of what works best for you and doing the right thing.
I love that.
I love that advice.
It's perfect. We want every survivor to go live their best life, whatever that means for
your
them.
Life. Yeah.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
Yeah, I remember I was at a conference maybe 8 or 10 years ago, and there was a guy, I think he had leukemia or lymphoma, and he was like maybe a year out. And so we were kind of talking, and he was like, man, I hope when I'm as far out as you, I'm not involved in this at all. And I was like, cool. Yeah. Good for you, like if that works for you, awesome. I'm with you.
Yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
I hope if you're still dreaming about what it looks like that far out, whatever that is, go do it. 100%. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for your time. I just value everything you say so much. Thank you. Really, the reason CKC exists, the reason this podcast exists, our mission is for Jason and every child who gets diagnosed and needs there to be research so they can be a survivor. Mm-hmm. And I'm so grateful that he shared his story. If you're a listener who wants to get involved in the research that's making treatment easier, that's making life easier for kids fighting cancer, you can go to our website, cannonballkidscancer.org.
That's right. You can also check out some of the research profiles of the things that we have funded at Stanford and Lucile Packard. Mm-hmm. And that's on our website as well. But also you can absolutely leave a review on our podcast, because that helps us reach more people and educate for change. And that helps us get the word out and solve the problem.
Yes. So thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you joining us, making a commitment to be part of this fight. Until next time, I'm Dana Nichols.
I'm Val Solomon.
And we will CKC.
See you later. Join us as we transform fear into courage and turn adversity into opportunities for change.
If you want to be involved in the conversations that create change in the world of pediatric cancer, take a moment, share, like, and subscribe.